Lesson 3, found on page 17, is the beginning of ratios. Now, ratios can be written three different ways. So you can write it with a colon, you can write it with the word to, and you can write it with a fraction. I generally will write mine as fractions because, well, in math, we like to reduce, and it's same with ratios. You're going to want to reduce. And in case you're not sure of the definition, a ratio is a comparison of the relative size of two quantities. So, in looking here at page 17, 16 men for every 10 women. So if we would say 16 men for 10 women, well, we can reduce that. So it's another way of saying there's 8 men for every 5 women, right? Which is, you can see that here underneath. So you do want to make sure that you reduce. Now, what we get to here in this line, let me mark that with green, ratios can be expressed as decimals. When we express them as decimals, we do that by dividing. So the 16 divided by 10 equals 1.6. That's like saying 1.6 over 1. So the purpose of that is if we want it to be for a single person. And that's where we get there, the word per means for each. So the per, or for each, is definitely what we're going to be using that a lot. So remember, when you see the word per, it's going to tell you to divide. And it means per one. So per person, or per car, or per green, whatever, it doesn't matter. But if you see per, you're going for each one, and it tells you to divide. So when you did the 16 over 10 in that above example, and we got 1.6, remember the men were on top. So there's 1.6 men for every one woman. It's for each. Now, here in number 2, where it says ratio of women to men, okay, now women are first. So we'll do 10 over 16, right? And we can reduce that to 5 over 8. So there'd be our ratio. If you want to talk about in a meaningful sentence, if we would divide that, we would get 0.625. So there are 0.625 women for every one man. And that's where we get the per. So 0.625 women per man, depending on how you use it. And that's how you can, when it says meaningful sentence, that would be a way to do it. Or there are 5 women for every 8 men. You can decide if you want to bring it per if they don't specify. But that's another way to kind of look at that. All right, at this time on page 18, if you haven't already done so, I'm going to ask you to pause this video and work through numbers 3 through 6. And after you do that, come back and I'll have the answers on here. If you've already done that page, then just go ahead and keep watching and we'll move on to page 19. Okay, so now you see the answers. There's 3, 4, and 5, including 5A, 5B, C, and number 6 are there. So we will now go on to page 19. So ratios can be two different things. They can be part to part or part to whole. And it's going to be very, very important that you can distinguish between these two things. So when you're talking about part to part, think about when you're talking about like men, like if we have 13 people in the class, 7 men, 6 women. Well, men to women would be part to part because men are part of the class, women are part of the class, so part to part. If I would say men to all students in the room, men are a part, but all the students, that's whole, that's everybody. So when you're looking at them, you want to see, am I talking about everybody or am I just talking about part of the people? So that makes a big difference. And the reason why it matters is because when we talk part to whole, we can talk percentages. So 70% of the students in here have blue eyes. If I'm going part to whole, I can do that. If I'm going part to part, there are no percentages, and that's huge. So you want to make sure you're dealing with that. Let's look at number 7 here. 26 students, 16 men, 10 women. Ratio of men to all students is 16 to 26, and therefore 61.5%, right, because it's part to whole, because there's 26 students. Okay, number 7. In the example above, what is the ratio of women to the whole class? Well, how many women do we have? 10. So I have 10 out of 26. So there's using a colon. Now you write the ratio as a percent. So when I go 10 to 26, I've got to change that to a percent. So when I divide 10 divided by 26, I get 0.3846, And remember, to change it to a percent, we move it 2 places. So that's 38.46%. So using that in a sentence, 38.46% of the students in the class are women. So that's a way to look at that. All right, let's go on to number 8. If you haven't already filled this out, I'm going to ask that you go through and you fill out this table and then answer the questions. When you come back, the answers will be in there, and you can check to make sure you're on the right track. All right, I didn't fill out all of them in the middle because my fat fingers, it's hard to write in that small of areas, but the decimals, the part to part, part to whole, I want to make sure you could see those. And when it comes to the meaningful sentences in A through D at the bottom, it's really just taking that data out of the table and putting them in there. So, like for part A, you could say there are 75 adjuncts to 25 full-time faculty, or you could reduce that, right? I didn't reduce in this column because I didn't have very much space, but you could say, you know, there are 3 adjuncts for every 1 full-time faculty member. So you could, or that could have been A and B, you could have wrote it different ways. So you kind of want to play with that and see how they make sense. And if you are looking at sentences and you're not sure if it makes sense, feel free to shoot me an email and say, hey, this is my sentence for this, does it make sense? Because it takes a little bit to kind of feel comfortable taking the data and actually putting it into words. But let me know how I can help you with that, and we'll go from there. So there is the first half of the ratio lesson.